Before we get started, hit the comments and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Whether you're catching sunrise in Nairobi, burning midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to hear from you. Don't just watch silently, let me know where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. The wind at Fort Halden carried sand like tiny needles, stinging any skin left uncovered. It was late afternoon, the sky gold and bruised purple at the edges, the kind of light that made soldiers' shadows stretch long across the concrete. That was when the humiliation hit her hardest. Right in the open, right in front of everyone. Commander Ashlyn Ward stood quietly near the chain-link gate, her dusty black duffel at her feet, wearing an anonymous gray hoodie and plain cargo pants. She looked like someone's lost sister, definitely not someone the Navy respected. And that gave the men nearby the confidence to laugh. Chief Petty Officer Calder Huxley, a broad-shouldered SEAL with a grin too sharp to trust, nudged his teammates. "Hey you," he called out to her. "New recruit? You look lost. What's your rank, professional backpack carrier?" The men erupted in laughter that echoed off the steel hangars. Ashlyn didn't answer. She simply zipped her hoodie higher and kept her hands inside the pockets so no one could see them trembling. Not from fear, no. From the sting of being small on purpose. Calder walked up to her, boots thudding like he owned the concrete. "Come on, don't be shy. What's your rank?" He asked it like a joke, emphasizing every puff of mockery. His teammates kept watching, smirking, waiting to see how far he'd take it. Ashlyn finally lifted her head, her blue-gray eyes calm, unreadable. She whispered, "You don't need to know." Calder scoffed and leaned closer, expecting intimidation to make her buckle. He tugged lightly on her duffel strap. "Let me guess. Civilian? Lost girlfriend? Someone's kid sister cosplaying soldier?" More laughter. More heat rising off the pavement. More humiliation tightening her chest. But then the ground began to tremble, not from footsteps, but from the unmistakable thumping rhythm of rotor blades. One, then two, then a third. The air turned violent, dust spiraling around everyone as three matte black VJ-92 helicopters descended toward the landing zone behind her. The SEAL's laughter choked into silence. Calder squinted through the storm of sand, his smirk falling apart. What's going on?" No one answered. The wind hammered the fences, banners whipped, and soldiers all over the base stopped in their tracks. Ashlyn didn't move. She simply stepped away from Calder and pulled her hair back into a tight knot, small, deliberate, practiced. The first helicopter touched down, its ramp dropping with a metallic slam. Marines in dress uniforms marched out, forming a line with frightening precision. The second helicopter landed, then the third. The noise swallowed the world, and still Ashlyn stood quiet in the center of it, like she belonged to the chaos instead of being overwhelmed by it. Calder stumbled back, shielding his face from the sand. This can't be for her," he muttered. But as the dust cleared, a Marine captain with a white-gloved salute called out over the roar, voice sharp as steel, "Commander Ashlyn Ward, your escort to the Pentagon has arrived." The SEALs froze. Calder's jaw went slack. And Ashlyn finally looked him in the eyes, not angry, not triumphant, just tired. She picked up her duffel, whispered, "Now you know," and walked past him as the Marines parted for her like she was gravity itself. The base held its breath. And for the first time that day Calder felt small. Ashlyn never turned back. The helicopters had come for her. And no one knew why. The rain in Caldor Ridge didn't fall gently, it slammed against the rooftops like it carried a warning. Ashlyn Ward remembered that night as clearly as the scar on her ribs. 3 years before helicopters came to escort her to the Pentagon, she was just Lieutenant Ward, unnoticed, uncelebrated, and nearly invisible inside the Navy's walls. The memory returned with the same heaviness it always carried, pressing on her chest as if the past were leaning over her shoulder, whispering, "You didn't get here easily." She had been stationed at a remote intelligence facility tucked between mountains that looked more like broken stone teeth than anything natural. Snow formed small whirlwinds around the compound, forcing her to wrap her jacket tighter each time she crossed the courtyard. Back then no one saluted her without being reminded. She wasn't loud. She wasn't political. She didn't elbow her way into rooms. Instead she listened, observed, calculated. Which made her the outsider among officers who relied more on swagger than skill. One in particular, Commander Rourke Dresden, found reasons every week to make her feel smaller. And for a long time she let him. Not because she was weak, but because she had a secret she couldn't risk exposing. It wasn't a mistake or a shameful past. It was something much heavier, a mission she was leading without anyone around her knowing. The Pentagon had handpicked her for Project Glasslight, an intelligence operation so classified it didn't officially exist. She had been tasked to track hidden military leaks. Someone was selling naval movements to foreign actors, and every breadcrumb pointed to someone inside the facility. Her orders were simple: stay unnoticed. Blend in. Don't rise above the noise. But the weight of staying small wore at her every day. Ashlyn was built to lead, built to fight, built to strategize. Yet she had to spend months acting like she barely existed. The night everything shifted began with a static, crackled phone call. She stood alone inside the dim hallway, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. "Ward," the voice whispered, "they know someone's watching. You need to back off." It wasn't fear she felt, it was the quiet burn of being underestimated. Again. She hung up and stepped outside to breathe the cold mountain air. That's when she heard footsteps crunching in the snow behind her. Slow. Deliberate. With purpose. Rourke Dresden. He stopped only inches from her shoulder. "Lieutenant Ward," he said, letting the title drip with condescension. "Still working late? You know, people talk when you disappear at odd hours." She didn't look at him. People talk when they're insecure. His jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being challenged. He leaned closer, breath warm against the freezing night. "You're up to something." "I'll find out what." She wanted to tell him the truth, that he couldn't find out because he was one of the suspects. But she swallowed the words. Not yet. Not until she had proof. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the compound for a split second. In that flash she caught something in Rourke's eyes: fear. Not of her rank. Not of being outrun. But fear of being exposed. The kind guilty men carry like a shadow. The moment passed and he walked away, leaving frozen footprints she knew she'd follow for months. She tightened her gloves and stared up at the storm swirling above. That was the night she realized her quiet mission was no longer safe. Someone was hunting the hunter. And the only thing she could do was stay invisible a little longer, until the truth tore the entire base open. She didn't know it yet, but that night would trigger everything that led to 3 helicopters landing at her feet years later. Snow hammered the metal roofs like a warning drum, echoing across the entire Caldor Ridge facility. Ashlyn Ward walked briskly through the dim corridor leading to the old comms room. Her unofficial workspace, the one nobody bothered visiting unless something was broken. The walls hummed with electricity, the smell of cold metal mixing with the faint scent of damp uniforms. Here she could think without eyes burning into her. Here she could breathe. But tonight, her breath felt heavy, like the air itself knew what she was doing crossed dangerous lines. She shut the door behind her, locked it, and pulled out the flash drive she kept hidden inside the lining of her boot. It contained 2 months of surveillance logs. 2 months of her staying small while watching everyone else carefully. 2 months of secrets that could shatter careers. She slid the drive into the computer. Screens flickered from black to blue, lines of encrypted data running across as the system decrypted her files. Her heart steadied, not out of calm but out of clarity. She finally had patterns. Time stamps. Access logs. Late-night transmissions masked as weather updates. Whoever the traitor was, they weren't sloppy, they were brilliant. Just brilliant enough to be cocky. And cocky people slip. She leaned closer as one line of data repeated itself. Same time. Same equipment. Same outgoing channel. Every Thursday. Midnight. Someone was using the storm to hide their leak. She traced it back to one specific access card. Dresden's. Her jaw clenched. She'd suspected him for months, but suspicion wasn't proof. This was something. But she needed more. Something undeniable. Something she could shove into the Pentagon's hands without the entire base burying it. She printed the logs and stuffed them inside her coat. She had to move fast. The next leak was in less than 20 hours. She needed a plan. She needed someone she could trust. But trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not here. Not when everyone had something to gain from her silence. She stepped into the hallway but something felt wrong, too quiet. The hum of generators was still there, but the usual chatter from the night shift, gone. The corridor felt hollow. Empty. She walked slowly, listening. Nothing but the echo of her own boots. Then she noticed the security camera above her, its red light normally glowing, was off. Dead. She whispered, "Someone's watching me." Not through the camera, but through the shadows. Ashlyn had 3 choices: hide, confront, or run. She chose the same thing she always did. She kept walking as if nothing was wrong, but she loosened her shoulders, ready for a fight. The stairwell door opened on its own before she reached it. A figure stepped out. Rourke Dresden. His eyes were too calm. Too prepared. Working late again, Lieutenant? His tone was oily, like he already knew the answer. Ashlyn kept her expression neutral. You're in my way. He smiled, slow and amused. Funny. You said something like that the night of the storm. Her pulse quickened. He remembered. You look tired, he said. Too tired for someone who isn't doing anything suspicious. She stepped past him, but he grabbed her arm. A mistake. Ashlyn twisted, dropping low and forcing his wrist back until he hissed in pain. His other hand shot up toward her collar, but she shoved him against the wall, forearm pressed tightly under his chin. His breath fogged the air, mixing with hers. You should stop following me, she whispered. It won't end well. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. Instead, he smirked, because smirking was easier than confessing fear. You think you're clever, but you're already in too deep. And the people you're dealing with? They don't forgive. They erase. She stepped back, pulse pounding. We'll see. As she walked away, she didn't hear footsteps behind her. That was somehow worse, because the silence told her the truth. She wasn't hunting one traitor. She was walking through an entire nest, and she had no idea how many eyes were watching her every move. The storm rolled in before midnight, swallowing Caldor Ridge in a blinding wall of white. Snowflakes slapped against the windows like frantic fingers begging to be let in. Ashlyn Ward zipped her parka to her chin and stepped into the freezing wind, her boots sinking into drifts that reached her calves. Tonight was Thursday. Midnight. The traitor's favorite hour. She clutched the folder of printed logs against her chest, keeping them close as she headed toward the satellite relay station perched on a ridge overlooking the base. If she caught the transmission happening in real time, she could finally prove everything. The world would know who had been selling their country piece by piece. And she could finally stop pretending she was invisible. The snowstorm howled as if determined to bury the truth before she found it. The wind shoved her sideways, forcing her to lean forward with every step. Her breath fogged instantly, forming small clouds that vanished into the darkness. She kept moving, boots crunching through the ice, eyes narrowed against the sting. The relay station glowed faintly through the whiteout, a single flickering light. But something made her stop. A second glow. Lower. Moving. She ducked behind a snowbank, heart slamming against her ribs. A figure trudged toward the station. Broad shoulders. Familiar stride. Rourke Dresden. She watched him swipe a card and disappear inside. Ashlyn's pulse hammered in her ears. This was it. The moment she'd been chasing for months. She pulled out her camera, wiping snow from the lens, and crept forward. Each step felt like stepping through glass shards, quiet, careful, deadly. When she reached the door, voices drifted from inside. Not Dresden's alone. Someone else. A woman. Ashlyn froze. She recognized that voice. Lieutenant Mara Kellis, communications officer. Sharp-tongued, always polite, always distant. It hit Ashlyn like a slap. There were two of them. She pressed her back against the wall, listening through the metal. The storm gives us 15 minutes, Kellis whispered. After that, radar sees us. We only need 10, Dresden replied. Ward's getting too close. Ashlyn grit her teeth. She felt the betrayal slice deeper than any knife. Kellis had once brought her soup when she was sick. Had once told her she admired her discipline. All lies. Every kindness a mask. Ashlyn inhaled sharply, and the sound was just loud enough. Inside, something clattered. A chair? Footsteps? Did you hear that? Dresden hissed. Ashlyn sprinted around the back of the relay station, snow exploding under her feet. A spotlight snapped on, cutting through the storm. Ward! Dresden shouted. The door burst open. He barreled outside, gun drawn. Ashlyn dove behind a generator, heart pounding. Snow stung her eyes, her skin, her lungs. Kellis followed, weapon raised, scanning the white chaos. A bullet slammed into the generator beside her, showering sparks. Ashlyn rolled, drawing her sidearm. She fired once, hitting Dresden's shoulder. He cried out, stumbling into the snow. Kellis screamed his name and fired back, rounds tearing through the storm. Ashlyn dropped low, using the snow as cover, every breath burning like ice. She moved fast. Calculated. Silent. She circled behind Kellis, rose from the white haze, and pressed her gun to the woman's back. Drop it, Ashlyn said. Kellis trembled, but instead of surrendering, she spun and fired wildly. The bullet grazed Ashlyn's ribs, ripping heat through her side. Ashlyn fired. Kellis fell, the snow beneath her turning red. Dresden scrambled backward, clutching his bleeding shoulder. You don't know what you're stopping, he spat. You think this ends with us? Ashlyn staggered toward him, ribs screaming in pain. It ends tonight. He tried raising his gun again, but the storm swallowed the sound of the fight as she kicked it from his hand and pinned him to the ground. Snowflakes gathered on his lashes, melting like tears that weren't his. "You're done," she whispered. But as she hauled him to his feet, he laughed, a cold, broken sound swallowed by the storm. "You have no idea who's really watching." Ashlyn shoved him forward, her breath ragged. But deep inside she knew he was right. This wasn't the end. It wasn't even close. The medical wing at Caldor Ridge smelled like antiseptic and old steel, sharp, cold, and lonely. Ashlyn sat on the edge of the examination table, clutching her bandaged ribs while the storm outside hammered the windows like fists demanding entry. Dresden had been taken into custody. Kellis's body had been covered with a tarp and hauled away. The base should have felt safer now, quieter, relieved. But it didn't. If anything, the silence felt heavier. Like the air was waiting for something else to break. Ashlyn kept her breathing steady as the medic fussed with her bandages. He asked no questions. Probably ordered not to. Good. She didn't have answers anyway. When the medic stepped out, Ashlyn reached for her coat. Her folder of printed logs was still tucked inside. She pulled it free, flipping through the pages again, scanning for anything she missed. Patterns. Numbers. Times. But a single line caught her eye, one she'd overlooked because it seemed insignificant. A series of small data packets sent 3 seconds before every major leak. 3 seconds. Every time. A pre-signal. A trigger. A warning to someone else. Someone above Kellis. Above Dresden. Ashlyn whispered, "There's another one." Before she could study it further, the door slammed open. Colonel Ira Maddox, base commander, stormed in with 2 MPs at his back. He was a towering man with a beard streaked gray and eyes sharp enough to cut through walls. "Ward," he barked. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. Ashlyn slid off the table, tucking the folder into her jacket as she followed him down the hallway. Maddox walked fast, his boots slapping against the tile in quick, angry bursts. "You know why I'm angry?" he said without looking at her. "You didn't authorize my investigation. That's the polite version. Here's the real one: you made me look blind." He stopped so suddenly she nearly collided with him. He turned, lowering his voice. "Dresden claims you've been spying on personnel without clearance." "That's not true," she said. "Which part isn't true?" Ashlyn locked eyes with him. Steady. Controlled. "The part where he pretends he wasn't selling secrets." Maddox studied her face, searching for cracks. "I want to trust you. But trust is expensive here and you haven't paid for it yet." Then he leaned closer. Someone high-ranking ordered Dresden's silence. Ashlyn's stomach tightened. "You mean?" "Yes. Someone outranking both of us." Her pulse spiked. "You think the leak goes higher?" "I don't think," he whispered. "I know." They resumed walking. Ashlyn felt the weight of the revelation settle like frost along her spine. Someone above them, watching. Someone who'd sent those 3-second pre-signals. Someone who knew her investigation was inching closer. Her breath quickened. A hunter couldn't hunt without being hunted in return. "Who gave the order?" she asked. Maddox's jaw flexed. "Pentagon officials." Ashlyn stopped walking. The hallway spun. "The Pentagon covered it up?" "Not all of it," Maddox said. "One office. One branch. One chain of signatures but no names." She exhaled slowly. A ghost chain of command. Someone hiding behind bureaucracy. They reached the operations center. Screens glowed in the dim room, operators hunched over keyboards, radios crackling. Maddox gestured for her to follow him into his private office. The moment the door closed, he locked it. "They're coming for Dresden," he said. "Not to question him. To extract him. Erase him. And maybe you." Ashlyn's blood chilled. "Because I know too much? Because you weren't supposed to find out." Ashlyn moved to the window. Snow spun outside like a white fog. "What do you need me to do?" Maddox's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Survive the next 48 hours. Before she could respond, the base lights flickered. Then died. Emergency alarms wailed as the entire facility plunged into red-lit darkness. Maddox reached for his gun. Ashlyn whispered, "They're already here." The nest was awake and coming straight for her. Red emergency lights washed the hallway in pulsing streaks, turning every corner into a heartbeat of danger. Ashlyn Ward stepped out of Colonel Maddox's office with her hand hovering near her holster, breath sharp, pulse pounding hard enough to shake her ribs. The alarms wailed through the entire facility, loud enough to rattle the metal vents above. Somewhere down the hall, boots thundered, too many boots, too coordinated, too fast. Whoever had come for Dresden wasn't trying to be subtle. They were here with purpose. With authorization. With confidence that everyone would get out of their way. Maddox locked his office door behind them. Ward, stay close. We move to the detention wing now. They'll already be there, Ashlyn said. That's why we're going anyway. They pushed down the corridor, stepping through shadows that flickered as backup generators struggled for life. Ashlyn kept her breathing steady, listening between the alarm pulses for anything off. Metal clicks, radio static, footsteps that didn't belong. They reached the stairwell and Maddox eased open the door. Cold air swept in, carrying the smell of gun oil and snow. Then, a sound. Fabric brushing metal. Movement on the level above. Ashlyn raised her hand. Someone's here. Maddox nodded. He jerked his chin toward the lower level. They descended quietly, boots landing soft on concrete steps. Halfway down, voices drifted from below. Calm, precise, professional. Secure the prisoner, someone ordered. And retrieve the lieutenant's files. Everything she touched. Ashlyn felt ice crawl up her arms. They weren't just after Dresden. They were after her. Maddox leaned close, whispering, 3, maybe 4 of them. He didn't have to explain the implication. More would be waiting outside. They were boxed in. Ashlyn scanned the stairwell for an escape, her gaze locking on a maintenance door 2 levels down. There, she whispered. We get into the boiler tunnels. They run under the detention wing. Maddox didn't question her. He just moved. They slipped down the last flight as the voices grew louder. Ashlyn pressed her palm to the maintenance door. Lock. Maddox crouched beside her, tools already in hand. As he worked, Ashlyn stood guard, gun drawn, ears tuned to the echo of boot steps. Then the stairwell door above slammed open. A beam of a flashlight cut through the red haze. Move, Ashlyn hissed. Maddox snapped the lock. The door popped open. Ashlyn slipped inside first, Maddox behind her, muffling the door shut just as the flashlight beam swept the steps where they'd been seconds before. Inside the tunnel it was pitch black. The air was hot and thick with old steam. Pipes rattled overhead like metallic bones. Ashlyn found the wall and eased forward, letting her fingers guide her through the darkness. Behind them, the stairwell door creaked open again. They came this way, a man growled. Ashlyn motioned for silence. Maddox nodded. They moved deeper into the tunnels, steps light, breath held. The floor vibrated faintly, generators struggling back to life far above. A light flickered ahead, faint, trembling. Ashlyn raised her gun, every muscle coiled. Then someone stepped into view. Not an enemy. A teenager. 15? 16 at most. Skinny uniform sleeves too long. A technician in training. He froze at the sight of them, eyes wide. Ashlyn whispered, quiet. We're not here to hurt you. He swallowed. They told me to shut the tunnels. I didn't know why. Maddox stepped in front of him. Son, what's your name? Kyle Marin. Kyle, listen, Ashlyn said softly. You're going to see men with guns. They'll tell you we're the threat. Don't believe them. We're trying to stop something bigger. But we need you to help us. He shook, fearful but listening. What do I do? Lead us to the lower access door, she said. The one that opens behind the detention wing. Kyle nodded quickly. Follow me. They moved fast now, Kyle weaving them through valves and pipes until they reached a rusted hatch. He pushed it open, revealing a narrow view of the detention hallway. Ashlyn saw figures in black uniforms moving Dresden into a reinforced carrier. He was unconscious, or pretending. Maddox whispered, We're too late. Ashlyn stared, her jaw tightening. No, she said. We're just in the middle. Because the real question wasn't who was taking Dresden. It was who they were delivering him to. Hours passed, but the tension in the bunker never faded. Rain hammered the steel roof above them, each impact echoing like a countdown to something worse. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting long shadows across the briefing table where Colonel Grant paced like a caged animal. Maya sat with Leah and Sergeant Cole, quietly reviewing the new recon images. But her mind wasn't on the photos. It was on the pattern, the one she'd been tracing through every failure, every ambush, every coincidence. Something inside the base was wrong. And someone inside was helping the enemy. All right, Grant barked, slamming a stack of papers onto the table. We move at 0400. We hit their ridge outpost, overwhelm fast, clear the supply routes and get out. Clean and simple. Maya lifted her head. Sir, no plan is clean and simple when they already know we're coming. Grant stopped mid-stride. What's that supposed to mean, Captain? Leah glanced between them nervously. Cole tensed. Maya spoke calmly, the way she'd learned to in rooms full of men who doubted her. Every mission we've run in the last 2 months has been compromised. The enemy hit us before we made radio contact. They're either psychic, she pointed at the map, or someone is feeding them intel. Grant's jaw flexed. Delta officers don't accuse their own without proof. And smart commanders don't ignore patterns that get their soldiers killed, Maya countered. For a moment, silence consumed the entire bunker. Cole broke it first. She's right, sir. Every time we move, they're already waiting. Someone knows our routes, our timing, even our fallback positions. Grant turned to Cole. You too. Respectfully, yes. Grant's eye twitched. This is not the time for conspiracy theories. We're moving at 0400 and that's final. Maya leaned forward. Sir, if we walk into another ambush, the blood will be on your hands. Grant slammed both hands on the table. Watch your tone, Captain. But Maya didn't back down. My tone is saving lives. The lights flicked again. Thunder rumbled. Outside, soldiers moved through the hall, unaware that inside the bunker, the real battle had begun. Grant straightened. You don't outrank me here, Captain. Maya met his glare. No, sir. But in the field? You follow my command. He hated that. Everyone knew he hated that. A man built on ego forced to accept that someone younger, calmer, and infinitely more capable took over once boots hit the mud. Grant grabbed his notes and stormed away from the table. Maya exhaled. He's going to get us all killed. Maya shook her head. Not if we stop this before sunrise. Cole lowered his voice. What's the plan? Maya tapped the recon photos. We run the mission. But not the way he ordered. Cole nodded slowly. You're thinking a split infiltration? Exactly. 3 units. Low profile. No comms until we hit the halfway ridge. If the enemy still finds us, Maya paused. Then we know the leak is here inside HQ. Maya swallowed. And if they ambush the colonel's route? Maya's eyes hardened. Then we save who we can. The bunker door opened unexpectedly. A young comms soldier stepped in, drenched from the storm. Captain, you need to see this. He held out a wet intel tablet. Encrypted message intercepted 15 minutes ago. Maya took it. Her stomach dropped. Her team's coordinates. Their planned route. Their exact departure time. Sent from inside the base. Cole whispered, It's one of ours. Maya stood, fury sharpening every muscle in her body. Not anymore. At 0400 we hunt. The storm outside intensified, but nothing was louder than the truth they had just uncovered. The night had turned into a living nightmare. Wind lashed against the armored vehicles, snow stinging faces like tiny shards of glass. Ashlyn Ward crouched in the lead Humvee, eyes scanning the horizon through frost-fogged goggles. The storm had swallowed Caldor Ridge completely, leaving only white emptiness and the faint glow of distant searchlights. Behind her, the other units followed, engines growling like beasts ready to pounce. Every second felt stretched like time itself was holding its breath. Every shadow could be an enemy. Every sound could be a trap. Maddox rode shotgun beside her. He hadn't spoken since the bunker, and the silence wasn't comforting, it was sharp, loaded with tension. Ashlyn's fingers drummed lightly on her holster, every nerve coiled tight. Her mind ran over the intercepted message again. Someone inside HQ had known their exact route, their exact departure, and the exact timing. They had been walking into an ambush. But she had changed it. She had to. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching. Keep it tight, Ashlyn ordered through the comms. Her voice was calm but hard as steel. No deviation. Eyes on me. Everyone silent. The convoy moved slowly, engines crunching over snow-covered gravel. A low rumble reached them, subtle at first, then unmistakable, the sound of rotors. Black helicopters emerged through the blizzard, gunships trailing them like shadows. The enemy had already anticipated their moves. Red shadows, Maddox muttered. They knew. They always do, Ashlyn said. Her jaw tightened. She had expected this. Months of training, missions, and covert ops had led to this exact moment. Every instinct screamed, every muscle prepared. She ducked slightly, signaling the convoy to spread. The Humvees split, veering left and right as the helicopter rounds began to tear into the snow around them. Bullets shredded ice, spraying crystalline shards across the vehicle's metal sides. Ashlyn rolled out of the Humvee, her boots crunching deep into the snow, rifle raised. She moved fast, silently, her squad following without hesitation. She had trained them for years to trust her, to follow when every angle was death. Ahead, she could see the enemy operatives moving with deadly precision, fast, coordinated, confident. One of them spotted her and fired. The shot tore through the snow beside her, spraying ice across her jacket. She dove behind a snowdrift, chest heaving, lungs burning. Her squad flanked the attackers, firing controlled bursts that forced them to retreat temporarily. But there was no time for celebration. One of the black helicopters descended low, rotor wash tossing snow like a tidal wave. Ashlyn counted three gunships, 3 paths of danger converging on her. Then she saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the ridge, tall, unmistakable. The traitor inside HQ watching them, communicating with the gunships via a satellite link. Her pulse spiked. This was the one who had betrayed them from the beginning. Ashlyn motioned to Maddox and her team. Split formation. Go low. Move fast. Take out the eyes first. The squad obeyed instantly, disappearing into snow and shadow. Ashlyn sprinted toward the figure, each step burning through exhaustion and pain. Bullets whistled past, the storm screaming around her, but nothing stopped her momentum. Her heart pounded with a single sharp thought. No one betrays my team and lives. She closed the distance. The figure raised a comm device, about to relay their location to the gunships. Ashlyn launched herself forward, shoulder first, knocking the device from their hands and sending them sprawling. The snow beneath them turned red as the first punch landed. Above the storm, the helicopters hesitated. Below, Ashlyn kept striking, relentless, unstoppable. Every second mattered. Every move decided who would live, who would die. The storm raged around them, but the real battle was here, in the freezing snow, where betrayal met justice. Ashlyn knew the moment she subdued this traitor, the tide would turn. But she also knew that the fight wasn't over, not yet. Because the real power wasn't in the ridge. It was waiting above at the Pentagon. The first light of dawn struggled through the storm, painting the snow with a pale, cold blue. The battle at Caldor Ridge was over, or at least the immediate chaos. Ashlyn Ward stood at the edge of the ridge, boots sinking into snow, chest heaving, fingers raw and bleeding from the fight. Behind her, Maddox and the squad regrouped, eyes wide but alive. The traitor from HQ was restrained, trembling in the snow, finally exposed for all their treachery. But the air didn't feel safe. It never did. Not when the real power was still watching. Suddenly, a low, distant thrum reached their ears. They froze. The sound grew louder, filling the frozen landscape with a vibrating warning. Ashlyn squinted against the flurries. 3 helicopters appeared over the ridge, descending fast, black against the stormy sky. Not the enemy. These moved differently, precise, coordinated, unshakable. They touched down behind the ridge in a synchronized sweep, ramps slamming open like thunder. Soldiers in crisp dress uniforms, helmets polished, rifles at the ready, spilled out and formed a perfect escort. Ashlyn didn't flinch. Her mind raced. Who had sent them? Her instincts screamed, this was not a coincidence. The 3 helicopters represented authority, power, and undeniable force. She adjusted the strap on her duffel and stepped forward. Maddox fell in beside her, eyes narrowing. Ward, they're not here for Dresden. Or us. They're here for you. The soldiers formed a path and one of them, a captain, stepped forward, voice steady over the wind. Commander Ashlyn Ward, your escort to the Pentagon has arrived. You are to comply immediately. Ashlyn stopped. Her pulse hammered, every fiber tense. The name Commander had weight. It carried authority no one in the room could contest. Calder Huxley, the SEAL who had mocked her years ago, had been replaced by dust and wind in her memory, but she felt his smirk somewhere behind her, imaginary yet sharp. She swallowed. The reality was undeniable. Her secret mission, her hidden rank, her invisible work, it all culminated here. She glanced at Maddox. His lips tightened, then he nodded slightly. No questions. He understood. This was bigger than anyone at Caldor Ridge. She stepped forward, boots crunching in the snow, letting the Marines guide her to the nearest helicopter. The rotors whipped up a blizzard around them, ice swirling like confetti of a battle she had already won. Every step toward the helicopter felt like walking into a revelation she had lived in shadow to reach. One Marine raised a hand, signaling the others to lower their weapons. Do not engage, he said firmly. Commander Ward is with us. Ashlyn kept her eyes forward, her expression calm but resolute. The traitor from HQ was taken down, Dresden incapacitated, but she felt the weight of what lay ahead. The Pentagon wasn't just a destination, it was a verdict. It was confirmation that everything she had done in secrecy, every night spent in shadows, every hidden move mattered. The ramps slammed shut behind her, enclosing her in the roaring belly of the lead helicopter. She strapped herself in, glancing once at the snow-covered ridge. Soldiers moved with precision, the storm whipping past, and in that moment she allowed herself the smallest, private smile. She had been underestimated, mocked, humiliated. Yet here she was, in command, untouchable, unseen until now, and finally fully recognized. The helicopter lifted, slicing through the storm with 3 companions on either side, heading straight for the Pentagon. Ashlyn pressed her hands together, feeling the turbulence in the aircraft. Her mind raced through everything that had led to this moment: the betrayal, the hunts, the ambushes, the lost trust. And she realized something simple but profound. The fear, the struggle, the hidden pain, it had all been worth it. The trip was quiet, yet every second roared with potential. Outside, the storm's remnants tore across the landscape. Inside, Ashlyn's heart was calm. The world had just caught up to her. The woman who had been mocked, dismissed, underestimated, was about to step into the place where power truly mattered. And this time she would not be invisible. The Pentagon loomed through the snow, vast and imposing, waiting to meet her. The helicopter touched down on the Pentagon's helipad with a roar that shook the ground and sent a swirl of snow into the air. Ashlyn Ward stepped off the ramp, boots crunching against the frozen surface, and finally allowed herself to absorb the magnitude of the moment. Every eye on the rooftop and in the courtyard turned toward her, some curious, some apprehensive. But she did not falter. Not anymore. The woman who had been mocked, humiliated, and hunted for years now carried the full weight of her rank, recognized, commanding, untouchable. Colonel Maddox fell into step beside her, still slightly cautious, still measuring the storm of authority that surrounded her. "Ward," he said quietly, "they'll brief you immediately. Well, you know better than I do how serious this is." Ashlyn didn't respond. She kept her gaze forward, scanning the imposing Pentagon walls, imagining the countless offices where secrets lay hidden. She felt the familiar coil of adrenaline, but beneath it, a calm certainty. She had survived storms, ambushes, and betrayal. Now she would finally face the people who had orchestrated the shadows. Inside the secure briefing room, the air smelled of polished concrete, leather, and faint coffee. Officers from multiple branches waited, expressions ranging from neutral to tense. Ashlyn stepped to the center, feeling every ounce of scrutiny like weight pressing against her shoulders. The lead official, a woman with steel-gray hair and piercing amber eyes, rose. "Commander Ward," she said, voice firm but respectful, "thank you for coming under such conditions. We understand the situation at Caldor Ridge was irregular." Ashlyn nodded slightly, her calm mask firmly in place. "Irregular is one word for betrayal within our ranks." A ripple of acknowledgement passed through the room. Every officer present knew the depth of secrecy she had maintained, the months spent uncovering a web of traitors. No one had suspected she held such authority, such skill, such insight. She wasn't a new recruit. She wasn't a civilian. She was a commander, a shadow operative who had worked in silence to protect everything they now protected openly. The official continued, "Our intelligence confirms your findings. Lieutenant Kellis, Dresden. Both were part of a network funneling sensitive operations to unauthorized foreign actors. Your intervention prevented further compromise, potentially saving lives on multiple continents. The Pentagon recognizes your role and is prepared to place you in a position of full command for ongoing operations." Ashlyn allowed herself a small exhale. The weight of years of secrecy, of being underestimated, of moving invisibly lifted slightly. She had been mocked by men like Calder Huxley, doubted by superiors, hunted by enemies. And now, the truth of her skill, her rank, and her authority stood unassailable. The officers filed forward, saluting. Every motion was deliberate, precise. Ashlyn returned each salute with a quiet, unwavering grace. She saw the respect in their eyes, the acknowledgement that she had earned, not through words, but through deeds that risked everything. Maddox stood behind her, watching. "You did it," he murmured. Ashlyn's gaze swept the room. "No," she said softly, "we did it. Every person who followed orders, who trusted in skill over ego, who moved in silence, we did it together." The storm outside had passed. Light filtered through the vast windows, illuminating the Pentagon in pale gold. The helicopters that had carried her here sat waiting, engines humming softly. Ashlyn looked at them one last time, remembering the dust, the snow, the rotors slicing through the storm, carrying her into recognition. She had survived every ambush, exposed every traitor. And finally the world saw her for who she truly was. Commander Ashlyn Ward, mocked no longer, underestimated never again, stepped fully into her power. The journey that began with ridicule, danger, and secrecy ended here, with respect, authority, and justice realized. The storm was gone, but the legacy remained, and she would ensure it never faded.